Have you ever wondered if fate has a curious way of surprising us, especially when we least expect it? That perhaps, amidst the most heartbreaking pain, an unexpected breath of life can find us and rewrite our own story? That's exactly what happened to Sarah, a woman who lived in the frozen and wild immensity of Montana, where the icy wind howled songs of loss through the Rocky Mountains, and the silence of the accumulated snow settled not only on the roads but also in her heart. Sarah knew loss in a way few can comprehend. She carried a grief so profound that her very soul seemed to have withdrawn, like nature during the harshest winter. Life, for her, had become a monotonous sequence of gray days, where even the smell of pine burning in the fireplace no longer brought the warmth it once did. She had isolated herself from the world, from that vibrant universe that once saw her, worked tirelessly with wild creatures, dedicating her life to rehabilitation. Yes, Sarah was an expert with big cats, a true whisperer to wild souls. But the tragedy of a recent past ripped from her not only joy but also the will to continue. Can you imagine the weight of that? The pain that makes you want to disappear into the horizon like the smoke from an extinguished fire. Well, she knew it well. Every snowflake that fell on her cabin seemed a reminder of the emptiness that Michael, her beloved son, had left behind. It was a void that chilled her soul and that she thought would never be filled again. But then, on a freezing morning, one of those where the air cut your face and the damp smell of the frozen forest hung in the air, a weak and unusual sound broke the heavy silence of Sarah's solitude. It wasn't the rustling of dry leaves underfoot, nor the crackling of wood in the fireplace, but something different, almost a moan coming from her own door. Can you believe it? As if the universe itself, in its infinite wisdom, was about to send not one but two unlikely angels into her path. What she would find outside would not only be a challenge but an unexpected second chance, wrapped in fur and claws that would begin to melt the ice in her heart, drop by drop. And that's where our story really begins, with an encounter that would turn her life, and that of an entire community, upside down. That day, the faint moan that Sarah heard through the solid wooden door of her cabin seemed like an irresistible invitation from life. It was a sound that mingled with the rustling of the ice-covered trees and the dense silence of the Montana forest. With a lump in her throat, but driven by a curiosity she hadn't felt for a long time, she turned the cold handle and swung the door open. What she saw there, sprawled on the pure white snow, made her heart leap in a way she thought impossible again. It was a lioness, large, majestic, but visibly injured, and nestled beside her, shivering with cold and fear, was a tiny cub, so small it could fit in her hands, exhaling a scent of damp earth and despair. Can you imagine the shock? That shiver that runs down your spine when reality hits harder than imagination. The lioness, with golden eyes fixed on hers, showed no aggression, only an almost human exhaustion. Interestingly, wild lions rarely come so close to human settlements except in cases of extreme need or persecution, a fact that already intrigued Sarah. She knew from her vast knowledge of wild animals that this was a desperate plea for help, not a threat. The scene was a living picture of vulnerability and maternal instinct for protection, and it ignited in Sarah a flame she thought had been extinguished forever: compassion. That compassion that had always moved her. For a brief moment, time stood still. The wind stopped howling, and the only audible things were the lioness's heavy breathing and the cub's whimpers. There, on that tenuous border between her world and that of wildlife, Sarah felt a primal calling. Anyone who has ever had an animal that seemed to just show up at the right time understands what I'm talking about, right? A moment where you feel that the universe somehow pushed you toward a decision. And if you love emotional animal stories, leave that like now and subscribe so you don't miss any of the twists and turns to come. The lioness seemed to say, count on you. The lesson here for us is that help can come from where we least expect it, and sometimes we are the where we least expect it for someone else. Sarah knew she couldn't simply close the door. The lives of these two beings depended on her, but a painful memory began to surface. An image from the past that would make her hesitate. Could she overcome her own past to help? Ah, the past. It has a peculiar way of catching up to us, doesn't it? Sometimes it comes as a whisper, other times as a roar. For Sarah, the sight of that wounded lioness and her cub brought with it not only the urgency of the present, but the icy echo of a past she tried, at all costs, to keep locked away. Before grief and loss consumed her, Sarah wasn't just a woman of the countryside. She was a legend among wildlife lovers. Her days were filled with the soft sound of the heartbeats of large felines under her care, the strong scent of earth and wildness that came from the enclosures where she rehabilitated majestic animals. She had the gift, the patience, and the soul to heal wounded beasts and return them to their home in nature. But then came the tragedy. The death of Michael, her beloved son, an echo of laughter that abruptly silenced and left a void so immense that even the air seemed thin. Who among us doesn't have an invisible scar that still aches when touched, right? That smell of the hospital, of disinfectant mixed with tears, never left her. It was the blow that made her abandon everything, all her dreams of animal protection, all her hopes. She withdrew, allowing the pain to become her only companion. For years, the silence of her cabin was broken only by the crackling of the fireplace, and the smell of burning pine was the only solace she allowed herself. And then, there, before her, with wild eyes fixed on hers, Sarah saw something familiar, something that made her stumble backward in the snow. It wasn't just a lioness. It was the lioness, that distinct scar near her left eye, and the way she tilted her head. Can you imagine the impact? It was Stella, the orphaned cub she had rescued and cared for when she was just a tiny thing years before. An animal she thought she would never see again, a living part of a past she desperately tried to forget. That second chance to find Stella again didn't come as a gift, but as a painful reminder of everything she had lost. The recognition was a shock that stirred the still waters of her heart. She found herself torn between the desire to flee from that ghost of the past and the primal instinct of compassion that the wounded lioness awakened. It was as if the universe, with its subtle irony, was testing her, forcing her to face the deepest wound of her loss. How could she care for a creature that brought back so many painful memories? And more importantly, how could she protect them from dangers she could barely imagine? You know how it is. In small communities, news travels faster than the wind in a snowstorm, right? Sarah managed to get Stella and the cub inside the cabin. The warmth of the fire in the fireplace was a relief for the wounded animals, and the smell of antiseptic now mixed with the wild but safe scent of the lioness's fur. For a brief moment, as she cleaned Stella's deep wounds and nestled little Hope, she felt a strange, almost forgotten peace, like the softness of a summer breeze in the middle of winter. But this truce was fragile. She knew that keeping two such large felines a secret in Montana was an almost impossible task. And the lioness, even wounded, did not lose her imposing presence, and the cub, with its small roars, did not go unnoticed. It wasn't long before the crunching of boots on the snow, breaking the silence of the following morning, announced the inevitable arrival. It was the neighbors, faces Sarah had known since childhood, now twisted in a mixture of fear and mistrust. "There's a lioness on your property, Sarah, and with a cub," the voices murmured, laden with panic and the smell of suspicion hanging in the air. The news had already reached the local sheriff, a respected man, but with little patience for wild problems. He arrived shortly after, the metallic glint of his badge contrasting with the snowy landscape, and gave Sarah a cold, direct ultimatum, sharp as an icy gust of wind: resolve the lioness situation. And you? Have you ever found yourself judging something or someone just by appearances before knowing the whole story? It's easy to let fear dictate our reactions, isn't it? The community saw the lioness as an imminent threat, a dangerous beast that endangered the protection of their families and livestock. They didn't see the vulnerability, the loss that the lioness carried, or the instinct of compassion that Sarah felt. The sheriff was clear: either she got rid of the animals, or he would, and not in the way Sarah wanted. The deadline was short, the pressure immense. There, with the weight of the ultimatum and Stella's gaze fixed on hers, Sarah realized she needed a miracle. She had to protect them, but how? The answer, she would feel, was closer than she imagined, hidden beneath the skin of the small cub. With the sheriff on alert and the community in an uproar, time was a luxury Sarah didn't have. But before any drastic decisions, she knew she needed to tend to her new guest's wounds. Gently, her skilled fingers, which were once her life, began to examine the small cub. He was so fragile, so helpless, and he exuded that sweet scent of baby animal mixed with the metallic smell of dried blood. And it was in that moment of quiet, where the only sound was the soft breath of her own daughter, Emily beside her, that a ray of hope emerged. Emily, with the innocence and clarity of children, looked at the cub and decided, "Let's call him Hope, Mom, Hope." That name, spoken by her daughter, was like a balm to Sarah's heart, a small reminder that life always finds a way. While carefully cleaning an area on Hope's paw, her fingers brushed against something hard and cold beneath his fur. It wasn't a bone nor a common injury. It was metal. Have you ever come across something that seemed harmless but hid a dark secret? Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she removed the object, a small and sophisticated military tracker with an almost imperceptible click. It didn't make sense. Wild lions aren't equipped with such advanced technology. The weight of the tracker in her hand was heavier than any stone. What could it mean? The answer chilled the blood in her veins. Animal trafficking. These weren't just two lost animals. They were victims of a dark network, likely cruel traffickers operating in the shadows, using the Montana forest as a route. That device, so small and seemingly insignificant, was irrefutable proof of a reality far more dangerous than she had imagined. It was no longer just about the protection of the lioness and her cub, but about uncovering a crime, facing a danger that transcended her own pain. Suddenly, the distant howl of the wind seemed more menacing, carrying the voices of those who exploit innocence. The past, indeed, had returned, and not just with lion claws, but with the sharp claws of a criminal plot. When the door of Sarah's cabin opened once more, the smell of freshly fallen snow invaded the room, but it was the air of a forgotten past that filled the space. There, standing in the doorway, was Jack Harrison. Jack, her former assistant, a man Sarah had taught everything she knew about wildlife, and who had disappeared from her life as abruptly as Michael. Sarah's heart leaped. It was as if a ghost had materialized in the middle of the room. Have you ever had that strange feeling that the universe is giving you a sign? What was he doing there now? The tension in the air was almost palpable, denser than the morning mist that sometimes covered the mountains. Stella, the lioness, let out a low guttural growl, a sound that made Jack's blood run cold, while Sarah confronted him with her gaze. "What do you want, Jack?" she asked, her voice as cold as the stones of the frozen river. Distrust was evident in every pore of her body. Jack, in turn, seemed burdened by an invisible weight, his eyes a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, with a slight tremor in his hands that did not go unnoticed. Have you ever found yourself mistrusting someone who was once very close because of mysterious circumstances? It's a loss of trust that hurts, isn't it? It was then that Jack broke down, amidst the aroma of burning wood and the heavy breathing of the lions. With a choked voice and the truth cutting through the air like a cold blade, he confessed. Yes, he had a connection to the animal traffickers, a terrible mistake driven by a desperation that led him down a dark path. But in recent times, he had been working in the shadows, fighting for his redemption, helping the authorities dismantle that very criminal network that had put Stella and Hope in danger. He sought Sarah because he knew that only she, with her past and her compassion, could give Stella a real second chance. Jack's confession was a shock, but also an unexpected spark of hope. He was there, seeking to overcome his past and correct a monumental error, bringing crucial information for the protection of the lions. But could Sarah and the community forgive him and trust him? And what would this unlikely alliance mean for the future of Stella and Hope? The room at Town Hall was buzzing with tension, the air heavy with arguments and fears. Then, amidst the noise of whispers and the smell of anxiety, A child's voice, small but incredibly clear, cut through the air like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. It was Emily, Sarah's daughter, who stood up, her eyes shining with a courage that not even Sarah knew she possessed. "Hope isn't dangerous," Emily said, and the echo of her innocent voice caused an almost sacred silence in the crowd. "He's just scared. And Mom said Stella is his family. You don't throw family away." Do you believe in the power of a child to disarm adult anger? It was as if the wind stopped and the room itself held its breath. That act of pure compassion and childlike courage was a turning point. Inspired by her daughter Sarah, with the resilience that only someone who has faced the deepest loss knows, stepped forward. The tremor in her voice had vanished, replaced by a serene strength. She didn't just ask for protection for Stella and Hope. She appealed to the best that existed in the community, for a chance for everyone to heal together. She spoke about her grief, about the hope that those animals had brought, and about how fear should not conquer humanity. Have you ever witnessed a moment when one person's kindness transformed an entire environment? It was like watching the ice begin to melt. One by one, the hardened faces began to soften. The sound of fear gave way to murmurs of recognition, and finally to a collective whisper of support. The sheriff, visibly moved, banged his gavel, and the dry sound echoed like a verdict of justice and redemption. The town of Montana, moved by Emily's courage and Sarah's overcoming, voted for the protection of the lions and the creation of a local sanctuary, a place where Stella, Hope, and other animals could live in peace, under supervision. It was a second chance not only for the lions, but for the community itself to rewrite its history. The decision was a triumph of compassion over prejudice, but the journey was just beginning. How would they make the sanctuary a reality, and what other challenges would this new mission bring? The story of Sarah and her lions, Stella and Hope, became more than a legend in Montana. It became a beacon of hope and a living testament to the power of compassion. The sanctuary, built with the tireless help of the community and the silent support of a redeemed Jack Harrison, transformed into a haven of peace. It was there, amidst the fresh scent of pine and the soothing sound of the big cat settling down, that Sarah finally found the overcoming of grief. That emptiness, which once chilled her soul, was gradually filled with purpose, unconditional love, and the healing that only the connection with nature can offer. Stella, recovered and majestic, taught everyone about the resilience of wildlife and the strength of maternal instinct. And Hope, the little cub who carried the name of Hope, grew strong, symbolizing the second chance, not only for his species, but for all who doubted the power of human compassion. Do you believe that an animal can teach us more about life than many books? Who has never felt that an animal understands our soul in a way that few words can? They show us the importance of loyalty, unconditional friendship, and the beauty of a heart without prejudice. The lesson is clear. The ability of animals to teach and heal us is a gift we often underestimate. Sarah's journey, which began with the deepest loss, became a narrative of redemption and a vivid reminder that, even in the greatest adversities, hope always blossoms. Her story shows us that protection is not just about defending, but about loving and allowing ourselves to be saved. It's about finding new meaning, a new path, when everything seems lost. If this story warmed your heart and inspired you to look at the world with more compassion, the next video suggested by YouTube will move you even more. Don't miss it. And you, have you ever had an animal that changed your life or helped you overcome a difficult time? Tell us in the comments.